And okay, dokie. I think we're going. Thank you, Mr. YouTube. And good afternoon, everyone. It's a beautiful sunny day here on the Eastern Seaboard. And I was having such a lovely time until my buddy online decided to say, hey, check this video out. And I sadly hit the play button. And here we are. So this is all LiteratureDevil's fault. I think we're going. Thank you, Mr.
That
YouTube.
is why I'm here.
And good afternoon, everyone. It's a
Throw a wrench
beautiful
in your
sunny day here on the Eastern
peacetime.
Yeah, this is not how I wanted to spend my Sunday, but, you know, we do things for you guys, I hope. I don't know why. This is not the worst video I've seen. I haven't seen it all. I've seen enough just to say that this is pretty weird. It's, I don't know, with Vosh, he was entertaining because he's so goofy and he was saying so many things wrong that it was just funny to listen to, right? With Lava-chan, it was just bizarre, just listening to him ramble on every 2 minutes going, what? No. And this one, I don't know. He's apparently not a British man with a British accent talking about how Goblin Slayer, which was a mediocre anime at best from yesteryear, I think last year it premiered.
I think it's from 2018.
Yeah, and I do watch anime. I just never bothered to see this. I read a bit of the manga. I think I saw clips on YouTube. It's not that big a deal.
Yeah, I actually don't watch anime that much. I do have my favorites, like I've said before, I think, but I rarely read any manga. But this is one that caught my eye, the Goblin Slayer, because it's very interesting. It mixes simplicity with complexity in a very tasteful way. And it's very bold and brazen with its simplicity, and then it's also very bold with its complexity. So that's why it's interesting to me. And I've read all the volumes that have come out in English, and I've seen the first season of Goblin Slayer in its entirety. I even read some of the light prose books that came out. I read one of the Goblin Slayer prose books that came out.
Yeah, this is, I think, just during when isekai was getting off the ground or being popular. And this is not part of the isekai genre, but essentially it is a RPG world. You have heroes who have spells, and they have daily limits, and then there's other classes, and they go on quests, and there's a guild. It's it's like 80% an isekai minus the actual person coming back to life. So the story itself is pretty brutal because it talks about a goblin slayer. Guess what he does? He hunts goblins, he kills them. That's the story. And the reality therein. That's about as bad as it gets. Now you think, well, what's the big controversy of? It's the first episode, and then that's about it. I didn't see past the first episode, but from what I've heard, it doesn't expand into the rape and the pillaging and the murder. Yeah, there's goblins that slay or get killed, but that's it. And the story therein. So we don't know what the big hubbub is about when it comes to anime, because in manga and anime, there's something for everyone. So you're going to get every genre, every format, good and bad. And Goblin Slayer was never on my radar to even bother watching. But there was a big talk about it. So this is one gentleman's feedback or response to Goblin Slayer. And apparently there's a disturbing ideology. Wow, that's a big word for anime. I don't think anime or RPG world, anime, medieval magic, and goblins is
a disturbing ideology.
Yeah. So let's just go for a few minutes, see how rancid our brain gets fermenting from all the beautiful thoughts. So basically every anime for adults.
What's it mean by excessive violence?
Yeah,
I don't think that violence is excessive in relation to how this show is portrayed. I think just trying to make it sound as horrible as possible.
Oh my god, guys, did you know there's a thing called anime and it's really violent, and there's like depictions of sex? Like yeah, since like the 70s.
Do you know Japan produces works that can be violent? That's absurd. Japan is known for its history, of long history and centuries of peace.
Oh yeah, of course. Imperialism is friendly.
The friendliest imperialism you could ever see.
Kamikaze is just a fancy word for dying for your country.
And the Sengoku period, I mean, that was just a bunch of guys just having fun.
Beheading each other for raffling.
It's always good. It's always a good sign to watch a video and have it immediately hit you with a trigger warning.
Warning! This video. At least it's not one of those pretentious warnings. Warning! Big truths are involved. With Major League.
Yeah. Was it? Does a Major League do that?
Major League. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's Major League.
2018 was a bad year for a lot of things. It was a bad year for the United States, with a record number of school shootings occurring, multiple government shutdowns, and the assassination of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. It was a bad year for Europe, with Ukraine declaring martial law.
Wow, this is going to be a great anime analysis.
Okay, mass school shootings, political intrigue, and maneuvering. All right, now let's talk about Goblin Slayer.
Jesus, you got the wrong audience here, buddy.
It's not even Goblin Slayer isn't even that complex. In fact, that's part of the beauty of it. It's part of the power behind Goblin Slayer is actually its simplicity, and the complexity lies in the character rather than the plot or anything else. Actually,
yeah,
they don't even have real names. His name is literally Goblin Slayer.
What do you do? Yes.
UK continuing to fumble Brexit, and the mysterious poisoning of a Russian double agent. It was a bad year for Asia, with Xi Jinping removing term limits, North Korea expanding its missile testing program, and the Iran nuclear deal coming to an end. It was a bad year for Africa, with Ebola breaking out in Congo, a corrupt election in Zimbabwe, and the passing away of former Secretary General Kofi Annan. It was also a bad year for the Toto song Africa. Like, come on, what is this? Why are there two of these? Oh, well, I guess this one's not so bad. But, and I know that this is a cold comfort, it was a really good year for anime. We got numerous all-time classics in the form of...
Okay, so all of that bad stuff, poisoning of a Russian double agent, Ebola, mass shootings, but at least it was a good year for anime. I guess that's the point of coming
This
to.
is a very strange... I do keep abreast of the news, but I'm not... half that stuff I was like, when did this happen? Like, what? Who... Who is that?
I guess it happened all in 2018.
Wow.
And Goblin Slayer is you lumped that Ebola,
Yeah.
Russian poisoning of a Russian agent, multiple mass shootings, Goblin Slayer. That's
I think my aunt died. I had some scotch and
lost my keys.
I pet my dog. Yeah, horrible year.
Hanebado and Bunny Girl, as well as a veritable avalanche of quality light series such as Yuru Camp, A Place Further Than the Universe, Gakuen Babysitters, Grand Blue, and Zombieland Saga. We were also blessed with a handful of animation powerhouses in the form of Devilman Crybaby, Violet Evergarden, and Megalobox. Longtime favorites like My Hero Academia, Steins Gate, Cardcopter Sakura, and Gintama received well-regarded continuations, and even the anime community's favorite whipping boy, Sword Art Online, finally got a solid entry. That's a lot of good stuff across the...
Whoa, cute pink girl with a pink automatic gun. That's anime, guys. That's awesome.
That is pretty anime.
That is just imagery is just awesome. That's amazing. That is an SP90, and she's firing it like a boss.
It's a pink one.
A pink one.
Bored. But with the good must come the bad, and in 2018 we did have one real stinker on our hands. A show at once...
I don't think it was ever a stinker. I just think it was just okay. It wasn't bad. It wasn't great. It was just simple story.
Trite and heinous, and so devoid of artistic merit that I have reservations about even calling it anime.
What?
What? Even calling it? It's very anime. I mean, yeah, it takes inspiration, obviously, from Western fantasy, but it's obviously anime.
It's nowhere near as gory as like Akira. It's Ninja Scroll. I mean, think of really brutal ones. Like it's nowhere near that level.
I've seen, even in my limited scope of anime, I've seen way more brutal anime than this. Like I've seen Even if you watch the Spike TV's Afro Samurai, it's way
Oh, yeah.
more brutal than this. I mean, by a long shot. Now I'm thinking about Elf. Have you seen Elfin Lead? That one I watched a long time
Oh, wow.
ago.
That is very brutal. Yeah.
Yeah, that one's far more brutal than this. This is this is Barney the Dinosaur compared to those
See,
things.
they can't criticize that because there's a female as the main character who is killing people. Ooh, can't talk about that.
Yeah, it's a woman killing a bunch of men in gruesome, horrific ways.
That's
Or
fine.
delightfully
Yeah.
gruesome, horrific ways, I might add. But
Apparently that's
gruesome.
okay. Yeah.
That's fine. That's fine.
The ladies are fine.
Indeed, last year we had to put up with the colossal failure that was the Junji Ito collection.
Okay, what is the Junji Ito collection?
I don't know.
Is he referring to Goblin Slayer? Because
He's about to say the Junji Ito collection and also Goblin Slayer.
okay,
So I'm not sure. I don't think it's part of that collection. I don't know what this collection is he's referring to, though. I don't know what that is. I assume it's bad or something.
yeah.
Oh, and also Goblin Slayer.
I think he doesn't like it. I just
I'm kind of I don't want to make any assumptions here, but
Yeah.
I think he might dislike Goblin Slayer
Just maybe.
to some respect.
Goblin Slayer absolutely lit the anime world on fire in 2018. It was the most watched anime of the fall season across the entirety of the US. It was the second most discussed anime of 2018 on the Crunchyroll forums, surpassed only by the two core Darling and the Franxx, and at the time of writing, Crunchyroll is running a renewed push for the series that covers a ton of their front page real estate. Goblin Slayer undoubtedly has its fans, many of whom don't just like the series but genuinely love it, but that doesn't mean that the zeitgeist surrounding the series was entirely positive. Fact is that the discussion surrounding Goblin Slayer was incredibly heated and divisive, especially in the first few weeks following the release of its debut episode. So what was it that got people...
I want to know who the hell was arguing how this is such a bad show. I mean, what extension of the Weeboo network that is like reserved for the people who get offended by everything?
I guess it's the Anime News Network.
I don't know.
Pretty much all American media that reports on anime.
Everyone who's watched anime is like, yeah, it's got sex and violence and titties and all kinds of crazy things. Like, what's the big deal?
Yeah, but this is violence against women. You can't have that. That's no longer acceptable in the West. We're a post fairness, post freedom society.
Yeah, this was a show that came out on weekends past 12 at night in Japan. Okay, the guys knew what they were doing. It wasn't really that bad. Yeah, it's violent, but it's nowhere near as violent as some other ones. So,
and, I mean, keep in mind that these are the same people who would, if the genders were reversed, if it was a man getting violated in such a way, they'd be laughing at it, treating it as a joke.
maybe they might even be inspired. It's like, oh, look at this reversal. It's so unexpected. Blah blah blah. It's like,
It's so stunning and brave.
Oh yeah, they can't procreate with men. Just so you know, they're.
Yeah, that's that is the reason why that happens in the show. 'Cause
Yeah.
they need. There's no female goblins.
Yeah,
As far as I
that's
know.
how it works.
talking. For the unaware, here's the basic idea. Episode 1 of Goblin Slayer features two distinct scenes of female characters being brutally sexually molested by a pack of goblins in fairly graphic detail.
Awesome. It showcases how evil the enemies are. They're goblins. They're horrible creatures. They must be destroyed. Goblin Slayer, everyone.
Yeah, I mean, look what they do. The goblins, they go around, they raid villages, they steal food, they steal items, and all that the usual things you would expect a race like the goblins would do. Now, if you take away the fact that they rape and do horrible other things to people, if you take those away, what are you left with? Just a group of hungry, starving little creatures who stay alive through violence and trying to steal things. That would make them more sympathetic. If we took away this whole vision of sexual assault and rape and all that stuff, it might paint the goblins as sympathetic because all they're trying to do is survive. And then Goblin Slayer comes in and he's brutal and he kills all the children and he burns them all alive. And there's all these things that he does to goblins that would make him a monster in the eyes of the audience because he's being way too aggressive and brutal against these creatures. It's kind of like if you put Jack Bauer in the Mayberry universe, like you
No.
send Jack Bauer to work with Andy Griffith or something, like Jack Bauer is going to be seen as a monster because he's torturing guys who like jaywalk and stuff. Oh, but he's seen as a hero in 24 because he's battling people who launch terrorist attacks and gas attacks and nukes and things.
Well,
If you had goblins not be so bad as they're depicted here, as being completely unsympathetic, completely irredeemable, then Goblin Slayer wouldn't need to be as aggressive, and he'd be more seen as a villain, probably.
I'm just writing in the comments. There was a manga called Wolf Guy. That is seriously violent, and there's all this rape and sex, and like these guys just tear each other apart. So yeah, there's much more brutal anime and manga out there. The fact that we have a slight depiction of what the horrors of fighting in a cave are like at the first episode of a series, which then no longer has, as far as I know, the elements of rape in them or sexual molestation.
I think this is the first episode is really the only one that showcases that, and then after that, it's alluded to. I mean, you get like naked women and everything a little bit there, but this is the only time it's really showcased. Like this part is really depicted because it really wants you to get the sense of how dangerous and how cruel and evil these goblins are.
And I think that's actually a really good idea. It's a very simple idea. Whenever you play Baldur's Gate or any knockoff of the overhead sort of camera style games, the isometric style where you're fighting hordes and hordes of enemies like Diablo, you're like, how the heck can these creatures survive? How are they so proliferated throughout the environment? It's like, oh, they take women and they use their wombs. Done. Explains it. It's disgusting. They're evil. You got to kill them. That's it. There's nothing gray about them. They are really depicted as this horrific thing that must be destroyed through this fantasy world. And
exactly.
That's the point.
Yes, that's basically it. That's all that the goblins are. They are an evil force, completely irredeemable. There are no upsides to goblins. Even there's a note at the end where a priestess says, "What if there's a good goblin?" And then Goblin Slayer's like, "Well, you might find one if you look really hard, but he doesn't really care. He's going to keep killing them." And it actually backs up his point because later stories make a note that they run into a goblin that seems relatively harmless, like a child goblin, like you run into at the end of the first episode here. There's actually a goblin, I think a goblin lord or something, and you get to see him as a kid, a child goblin, like the goblin that the Goblin Slayer kills in the first episode. And as soon as the warrior or the adventurer takes pity on him and turn their back, he kills them. He bashes their brains in with a skull with a rock. And so, yeah, they're not, even the children, even the young goblins are not even sympathetic because they are just there to trick you. They will wait for you to take pity on them. They'll take advantage of your pity, take advantage of humanity, and then they will wait for an opening, and then they will kill you.
Yeah, people are mentioning other much more violent stories in the comments. I haven't heard of them all. Ninja Scroll for sure, Berserk and Gantz for sure. I haven't watched Claymore. Very similar. I've seen some clips. I've read some of the manga. So yeah,
Claymore's actually pretty good. I watched it maybe 10 years ago or something.
Yeah,
I remember Claymore being very good.
Yeah, it's not not as old as Ninja Scroll, but it's pretty old. So yeah, there's been a lot more violent stuff. So this guy, 2018 is so violent. It's like, no.
Along with another female character visibly peeing herself in fear.
Oh my goodness, we've never heard or seen that idea before. Wow.
A lot of people were surprised by just how grim the events of the episode were and took...
Is he not? Did he watch Goblin Slayer? There's a reason why that is depicted, because goblins have a keen sense of smell for women. And when she pees herself, it actually shows that in the anime, where they can sense that because her scent becomes a lot stronger and they know where she is. There's a reason for that. It's not just a weird fetish thing. It's actually part of the plot. It actually makes them it helps describe what the goblins can do.
And then the Goblin Slayer says, "Okay, we got to kill. We have to." Well, the goblin was already dead on the ground. He starts cutting it up to get the blood on him, so his smell gets covered up. So it's like part of the story. That's what you do in your story, guys. When you actually have elements that seem gruesome or disgusting or whatever, and they're either plot devices or they're components of pushing the narrative forward. That's called good writing. That's called not wasting the audience's time showing us what needs to happen in order for this story to take place. So, bravo, Goblin Slayer. Even though it's nothing special, but that's good.
Yeah, good job having good writing and fitting things into the plot.
Yeah.
Umbrage with the perceived exploitational nature of the rape scenes. This was further exacerbated.
Okay, the rape scenes last a whole goddamn 4 or 5 seconds. You don't see anything.
Yeah, you don't see anything. It's just they set them up and then they cut away. It's all implied.
Yeah.
It's only there so that you can see how big of a threat these goblins are and how irredeemable they are, how monstrous these goblins are.
By the fact that Crunchyroll initially mislabeled Goblin Slayer as a TV PG rated series. People on the other side of the aisle argued that Goblin Slayer is a dark fantasy show and that portrayals of rape shouldn't be shied away from, and that someone thinking the rape scenes were sexualized reflected more poorly on them than it did on the show.
Pretty much. I mean, I'm not completely agreeing with that, but there's so little to go on. You're like, I guess. I mean, what would you read into something that lasts a few seconds? Like, oh, that's a rape scene. It's like, oh no, that's horrific to women.
We can see how it happens. I mean, we can see that it happens, but we don't see anything else.
The fact that the character, what's her name? I don't even know her name, is so freaked out about it because her friends just died and they're all rookies. It's like,
oh yeah, her name is Priestess.
Really, her name is Priestess?
Yeah, her name is Priestess. They don't. Nobody has real names in this show.
Oh dear, interesting.
The fighter's name is Fighter, I think.
Well,
Monk's name is Monk.
that's kind of Jungian, I guess, if you want to talk about archetypes. But I mean, you need this. You need to have these elements showcased clearly to the audience, and they are. It matters to the characters on the screen, even if you have a different reaction. That's your own subjective experience. But if the character is reacting and it's important to them, great. We understand why they're there and why they're so freaked out and why it's a bad thing.
I must say that I strongly disagree with the latter stance. But this is not a video about the rape scenes in the first episode of Goblin Slayer. There are other angles from which to view the series which are in dire need of discussion. But I also think the last word on these scenes hasn't been said yet. I've been monitoring, if you will, the debate surrounding the first episode of Goblin Slayer, and I find that the consensus, or lack thereof, has come up very short, and I would like to add something to it. So we're going to kick things off with that, and then segue into the main point of the video afterwards, which I'm going to keep a surprise for the time being. So these two scenes then. I'm of the opinion that these two scenes sexualize the events portrayed within them beyond a shadow of a doubt.
This man has no idea what sexualization, what sexuality is, what it means to be feminine, what it means to, like, any element. Like, this is not an attractive...
No, it is very disturbing. I mean, there's a difference, but this is not depicted in a sexy way.
Yeah, like the best you can get with violent sort of depictions of sex is when you have, like, vampire stories or where they sexualize the characters who are supposed to be violent, and they sort of, in the lore, let's say Anne Rice books, if you read any of that, the most pleasurable experience is when a vampire bites you, but that's because of the magic surrounding the vampire, etc. So there's this very hard correlation between sex and violence, okay?
Oh, yeah.
It's very hard in nature, okay? It's very tough. There are obviously some perversions, there are obviously some sadomasochisms, but that's very specific and very niche. So the majority of people aren't like that. And it's especially when you're talking about a show that's being shown on at 12:30 at night on weekends. It just doesn't make sense. Like, they know their audience. They know who this is for.
That's actually a pretty big element that a writer needs to always pay attention to. Know what audience you're writing for.
Yeah, and this person does not... I really want to know what the heck he thinks is sexual in these scenes. Women getting their clothes turned off is not sexual.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Like there was a slight discussion of one of the Saw movies where they involved a woman being sprayed with water, and and she was going to be like frozen to death because it kept spraying her with water. I think, but the torture device, because Saw is known for its torture devices, the movie franchise, and it depicted a woman being sprayed with water, and it's really cold in the room, and it's so cold that the water hurts her, and she eventually is frozen to death if she's not freed. But the original thought was to have her have like a shirt on, is to just to not have her nude, so it actually wouldn't be sexualized. In their minds, it wouldn't be, because they didn't want the audience looking at that and saying, "Oh, this is sexy." But they found out that having a wet T-shirt actually made it sexier. So what they did to actually devalue how much people would sexualize it was to have her completely nude instead, and that actually decreased how people saw it in a sexual way. It decreased the sexuality of it. So nudity isn't sexy on its own.
Exactly.
It has to be depicted a certain way. So just because the girls are getting their clothes torn off doesn't mean it's sexualized or sexy. It's just something that happened.
Which is very strange because they actually attack the girls with axes and knives, and you see them like landing blows. And the next scene, they're fine. And then they start tearing their clothes. They're like, "Wait, what's going on here?"
He actually gets into that a little bit.
And that's a very bad thing, both because the events themselves are very gruesome, and because the aesthetic adds to the gruesomeness. The way the rape is framed and animated is what makes it so repugnant, but that is not something everyone agrees with.
So what if you agree with it? That's a good thing, okay? The fact that they're showcasing bad things happening to the heroes or the characters in the story is kind of like what you were unexpected, because you saw the first 10 minutes of this anime. It's like, oh, a bunch of heroes, here's the world, they're off to go hunt some goblins, etc., etc., right?
It's a huge change, yeah.
So that's a shock to the audience. Oh, I wasn't expecting that. And that's what you want, especially for me who reads all the freaking isekai I can get, because it's all one big blur. So you say, oh, I wasn't expecting. Because every first episode of every manga isekai, there's a twist. There has to be a twist. Because if there's no twist, I don't care. What ends up happening in the last panel, you get reborn as a baby. Oh my God, what are you going to do? You get reborn as a girl. Oh my God, what are you gonna, like all these ridiculous scenarios? Like there's so many, and I think they've done almost all of them. So when you have one of the more popular ones, like you get reborn as a slime, and you're like, oh, that's interesting. How is that going to work? And how do you survive as a slime? What does a slime do? How does your consciousness work, etc. So doing that in a story which is so generic, that has been done so many times, you have to have something new. So shock value, violence, not a big deal. Possibly,
it's a huge change. I mean, that's exactly right, because the way they play it up and the way it's different, is that the priestess. We start off with the priestess, who is the main character when you begin, right? She's petite, she's blonde, she's very like pure and innocent sort of character, and then she just starting off her career as an adventurer. And then they say, well, you can team up with other adventurers, so you can complete quests and level up, and it sounds really good. It's very Disney Channel-esque. It's very the singing birds, and I wouldn't be surprised at that point if they had a talking animal companion. That
right.
It's really that saccharine. And then she meets up with a group of young adventurers. Hey, we're going to go off and do our first quest. We're going to handle kill some goblins. And she's like, oh, can we really do that? And they say, yeah, we can do that, no problem. And then one day we'll get to top and I'll fight some dragons. You think this is her group that she's going to be traveling with throughout the series or something? We're going to figure out their needs and wants and goals and all that stuff. And then it's so Disneyland-esque that it's a huge shock when things go absolutely wrong, and it goes from maybe Saturday morning cartoon, I don't know what. One Punch Man, not One Punch Man, but like One Piece or whatever, something they show in the morning at a Saturday morning cartoon for kids. It goes from that style to blood and rape and violence. So it really gives a shock to the reader or the audience that this is going to be. It sets the tone of the show that the goblins are far more of a threat than most people realize, and that they will go very far in their cruelty.
And you need to depict that. This is why we have these kinds of stories. If you do not showcase it, what's the point of having an anime? What's the point of having all this visual all this motion, all these things happening. Do you really want to cut away from the violence and imply it all? Maybe there are some stories where you want to imply what could have happened that was so horrible to an event. But for the most part, you want to see what's going on. So that's why you watch these shows.
Mm-hmm.
And to give myself a frame of reference from which to argue, I'm going to cite someone with a very different opinion from mine. This is YouTuber Dimitri Monroe, channel name The S. Monroe Show, from his video Lazy Critique.
That's a guy?
I asked the same thing. I thought that was a girl, and then he says him, so I guess it is. Right. I guess it's a guy. Very luxurious.
Goblin Slayer 2 edgy. Quote, "This scene is portrayed with screaming, blood, crying. There is nothing that inherently feels sexy about it. To the people saying that this is somehow sexual, I think that says more about you if you can look at a girl being violated in such a way and think, wow, this is sexy."
Yeah. And let's be clear, this is not an actual girl. This is an anime character of a show.
It's not a porn. It's not a porn. Like,
this isn't kinky. This isn't kind of cute. No. This is people getting.
It's not depicted as kinky. It's not sexualized. There's no moaning going on. It's pure terror and horror in these screams. It's just there's nothing arousing about it. It's not even trying to be arousing. There's nothing like that in Goblin Slayer. It's depicted as horrific and disturbing as possible.
End quote. And just as a side note, I'm only using Dimitri's video as a jumping off point, and I don't want to incite anything targeting him, so please leave him alone. Regarding his line of reasoning, I think there's a conflation of two notions at play here. Namely, the idea that saying something is sexy and saying something is sexualized are the same statement, but that is simply not the case. Deciding whether or not a work of art is sexy is the prerogative of the audience. They see something and they find it either sexually arousing or not.
Okay, so therefore, you are thinking something is sexy if you think it's sexy. Great. So who's the pervert here? Is it me seeing? Yeah. Is it me watching a bunch of girls getting cut up? Or is it you saying, oh, this is obviously sexualized because there's a bunch of girls getting cut up and they might be getting raped, which we never actually see?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, come on. I mean, this is anime, okay? If they wanted to sexualize this scene, it would be sexualized.
Oh, God,
we wouldn't need a guy to come on and describe to us how it was sexualized. The anime isn't really known for its subtlety.
When it comes to that,
element, yeah. It's not really known for its subtlety when it comes to sexualization. So if they were going to sexualize that part, it would be clearly sexualized. But they don't.
Yeah, and just so you know, this is pretty obvious when you have a busty girl running around and she's bouncing around. Yeah, that's pretty, I wouldn't say it's sexualized. I would say that's kind of life and gravity and clothing. But
a little bit of anime fan service there.
And fan service, yeah. That's why you watch these shows. It's not hard to grasp. So I don't see how this person can sort of delve into the violent aspect and say, this is really just sexualized violence. You're like, really? Okay, show me where that is. And you have to go shot by shot, scene by scene. You can't just say, as you can see, her clothes get ripped off. It's like, yeah, because they're trying to kill her and rape her and whatever.
Show me how this apparently one scene in all of anime that is subtle in its sexuality, like it's subtle in its sexualization. Show me how it's sexualized.
Yeah, that's all we need. Some evidence and a good point of argument, and we can go from there. But he's just saying, no, it's just... It's all subjective. If you think you're getting a hard-on, that's exactly what's happening. Like, okay.
He will try to argue this point, though. It's interesting, to say the least.
No.
Of course, happens on an individual level and not collectively. Now, a work of art being sexualized is an act on the part of the artist. Subconsciously or not, they formed their work in such a way that it is meant to evoke arousal.
So here first it is sexualized because I say it is. And now he's saying it's also sexualized because the author said he was doing it this way.
So which one is it? Like, which one do we go with?
Yeah,
what the author says it's not, and then you say it is.
Which is completely opposite to just the actual evidence of what the thing is, what is happening in the scene. Like, it's just ridiculous. It's like, well, I think it is, and if the author was also thinking the same as me, therefore it is. It's like, no, I don't care what he thinks or they think, and I don't care what you think. I care what's on the screen. What is it showing me? That's all. I don't care what he intended. I don't care what you think you see. I want to know what's actually there. This is where we start, taking apart the subjective and objective observations. and we go scene by scene. We don't have to do that, but this is what it comes down to. People interpreting things incorrectly in their own heads, and then going, well, in the auteur theory, the director really wanted this to happen, and then you could really see that what you can't behind the rock, because the scene is not shot that way. It's like, dude, stop. That's not what's happening in the movie.
And maybe it will succeed, but it doesn't have to. What this means is that something being sexy and something being sexualized aren't mutually inclusive ideas. Something can be sexy and sexualized, it can be neither, or it can be only one of the two. A standard wallpaper pattern probably wasn't sexualized by its designer, but you never know. Someone might get their rocks off to it.
You never know whether a guy making a wallpaper pattern, which I don't know what that is.
And because the creator of a wallpaper pattern didn't intend it for it to be sexualized or sexy, but because someone found it sexy, therefore it is sexy and or sexualized.
Okay. And I guess he's covering his bases because he says even if he doesn't find it sexualized, the author did. The author did because it was his intention to make it. You're like,
and like even if he didn't do it, someone found it sexy or sexualized. Therefore, I'm right.
And we're talking about wallpaper patterns, guys. We're not talking about anime women or girls. Okay. Yes, you can subjectively interpret anything to be anything. This is true. That doesn't mean you're correct.
A piece of pornography, on the other hand, is by default intentionally sexualized. But if
Goblin Slayer is not pornography. It's not even close to pornography.
I'm not disagreeing, but it's nothing to do with your argument, sir.
the genre of porn that piece belongs to doesn't do it for you, then you might still not find it very sexy. Now,
It doesn't matter what I think I find it. It was what was in the screen. There was a woman. She was making a pose. She was slightly dressed. What do you think is going on here?
He's just trying to help her with a computer.
Clearly, she wants to buy some muffins. I mean, that's what women do.
I mean, look at this where he paused it. These are the main characters of Goblin Slayer. These are his main party. The priestess is a 15-year-old girl. She's not sexualized in any way. The High Elf Archer, she's like 1,000+ years old, but she too is not sexualized in any way either. There's even a part where they get in trouble and she gets her clothes torn off and it's still not sexualized or sexy. It's disturbing and frightening because you don't want bad things to happen to her or a priestess. It's not, and none of these characters are ever portrayed in any way that resembles sexualization or in any like form of sexiness. I mean, some viewers might view it as that, but the author clearly didn't intend that. It's all about personality. The only character I think in the whole series that is overtly sexualized is probably the witch, but she's not a main character. She just kind of just pops in every once in a while.
Expand the scope of our terminology a bit. We're going to move from sexualized and sexy to made to appeal. And
Oh my god!
He's going to go into this deep.
Just so you know, something which is sexy is not necessarily appealing. Okay, something which is sexualized is not necessarily made to appeal. Okay, these are words. Words have meaning, and you don't just start drawing connections between them. When I say to a girl, "You look sexy," there's a specific intention and response. When I say you look appealing, that is the most generic thing you could possibly say.
You look appealing.
You look all right in a general way. It's like, what?
What is that supposed to mean?
I am attracted to you in some capacity. It's like, what?
Like a platonic way? Like platonic? Like I'm appealing, haha? Like what is...
Yeah, this is not how you talk to women, but I'm just saying.
Am I funny to you? Like Rita Rudna funny? Rita Rudna appealing?
and appealing. We're going to use these terms to look at the portrayal of rape in media, because the nature of art is such that even though we don't like the idea of rape, it can still be presented to us in an appealing manner. It can.
Yeah, it can.
I think he even goes into, if I remember correctly, he's going to go into like porn fetishes tabs and everything.
Oh, well, here we go.
Here's porn category, see?
Oh, dear. I'm glad I stopped watching after like the first minute. Oh, this is going to be bad.
Can be made to appeal. Let's begin with music. Musical compositions are inherently tone pieces. We assign feelings to tones that make them evocative. So it's very easy to write lyrics about rape to a composition which invokes positive emotions.
Has everyone ever wrote a song about rape to evoke positive emotions?
He's going to give an example of one, I think.
Oh dear. Good luck on this amazing music that will surely win an award.
And people have done that. Remember this song from earlier? This is Sex Type Thing by Stone Temple Pilots, and I did not include it in this video without reason. It is a song sung from the perspective of an actual rapist. It is a commentary on the thought processes a rapist might use to normalize and justify their behavior.
Which is completely irrelevant to the actual...
It's a commentary, huh?
To the actual lyrics and the song itself, okay?
Yeah.
Again, we're talking about intentions of the audience and the intentions of the creator, right? Throw them away. You can't ever know those things. They're all subjective. They're all interpretive. He could have been an engineer, and he could have been wanting to talk about sprocket wrenches on the bridge he was using to build. And he happens to be talking or singing a song about whatever lyrics he's using. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what was inspired someone to make something. It doesn't matter what emotional state you were in to interpret a piece of art. Look at the art. Listen to the art. That's it. That's all you have to do. If you want to use a framework, you use all this crap, great. Just don't try to start projecting yourself that you think this is what's happening, and then you start thinking what the creator was thinking. It's like, oh, George Lucas was clearly on drugs, or George Lucas is a genius. Blah, blah, blah. It's like, listen, I don't know what George Lucas was thinking. I have no idea, and I don't care. I care what he made, whether it makes sense, whether it has value.
It also serves as a commentary on rape culture and the shocking frequency with which the victims of rape are blamed for the actions of the perpetrator.
There it is. There it is. Rape culture. There we go.
Okay, so anyone knows there's no such thing as rape culture. If there were, then the police would be like, oh, really? Who's using rape culture? Oh, those guys? Okay, we're going to round them up, and we're going to find out who they've been raping, and then it's gone. Rape culture's gone. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, people at least in the West, they're usually punished for rape. It's usually seen as a very horrific and terrible crime, actually.
You could pick any crime. You could pick murder culture. You could pick thieving culture. You could pick arson culture. It's like, oh, really? You're an arsonist? Oh, what have you lit on fire? Really? Okay. Well, here's the thing called the law, and these are the laws you broke, and you're going to jail. This is how these things work. Police don't sit on their ass going, yeah, there's a rapist somewhere. Yeah, okay, great. No, if someone has a culture, which implies a body of work or knowledge or group of people, guess what? The police are going to figure that out really quickly.
Yeah, I mean, there's pot culture. I mean, people they collect paraphernalia. They collect different pipes and other like clothes that associate them with the culture.
It's really easy.
It's pretty apparent.
It's pretty easy to smell someone who likes pot. Just so you know, it's pretty pungent.
Yeah, it's his own culture. That's what a culture looks like. Like it's pretty apparent. They have practices. They have traditions. They have rules and clothes and all that stuff.
When a society labels a behavior as illegal, and there is a person acting as such, guess what's going to happen to that person? They're going to get removed from society. They're going to be put in jail, etc. There's no culture to develop. There's no group of people to, unless you're talking about like master thieves, and I don't even know if that's a thing in reality, whether they all have their own little secret societies. They all know how to break into things and whatever. Who knows, right? I don't know about that guesswork. I'm just talking about actual people who commit crimes somehow not getting caught and having enough time to develop a society where there are now paraphernalia and tools of the trade. Like, can you imagine? Can you imagine like a group of degenerates that were rapists? Like, yeah, we're the rape culture, man. Yeah, everyone don't tell anyone because we're gonna go raping around. It's like no, of course not.
They can have like right now convention halls. It's like, is Neil Gaiman going to be writing?
Oh
this?
Yeah, Neil Gaiman. Yeah.
We had a serial killer convention.
That was brilliant. The collectors, yeah, fantastic, yeah. These things are not real.
It doesn't happen. Like if that were happening in America, there would probably be a shooting there or something.
It would be gun culture. The gun culture
People
would
do not like rapists. People don't like rapists. Nobody likes rapists. Okay, I'm pretty sure not even rapists like rapists. They don't even like themselves. So I highly doubt there's a culture going on.
Yeah. So the fact that these people are saying these things, meaning they haven't actually used their brains to actually stop and think for 2 minutes, going, how would this work? How does a white culture or supremacy culture exist? Like how do criminals operate and still survive in a society? The answer is they don't, and this is all one big house of cards. So,
yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Later. As a piece of writing, it's thoughtful, engaging, and deeply relevant. And there's one more thing this song is, and that is an absolute and total banger.
Yeah, but like he said himself, it's a commentary. Like it's a commentary that's appealing, not rape itself. So maybe there is a song out there that makes rape appealing in some manner.
Yeah, I mean,
but this song is not. He said himself, this is a commentary on rape, and it's the commentary itself that's appealing.
You can look at death metal and how they sort of glamorize murder, or not specifically every version of death metal, obviously not. Whatever there's lyrics, they can exemplify murder or killing or what have you, or the power trip of like defeating someone. Same with gangster rap, the culture surrounding being someone in control, someone in power, someone who has all their bitches, someone who has all their N-word friends, all their buddies.
Shut up all their enemies and all that stuff.
It's just killing, shooting, not raping, but having all their women. It's power. Sure, we get it. It's a song. It's not real. It's not believable. There are no rappers except for maybe 50 Cent, who's actually got shot at a few times and lived to talk about it. It's supposed to be a fantasy, and it sounds good, and it sounds cool, and whatever you get out of it is your thing. That's totally cool. That's what's beautiful about music. It's fast, it's quick, it tells a story sometimes, and it works with whatever you're doing. It works with dancing, works with fine dining, it works with walking down the street, etc. So, bravo, you like and can interpret music. Guess what? It's not a literal interpretation.
Yeah, he even said it was a commentary, so this is probably a bad example for him to use.
It is a song that invites you to do some headbanging to it. But if you do, in a very, very abstract way, you're complicit in the thought process of the rapist. The music that you're rocking.
Are you kidding me? You just said it was a commentary.
But you're complicit.
Okay. Yeah, but you're complicit in his thinking. You're not complicit in the fact that this guy is commentating on how these people think and putting it in a package that you can relate to or you can find appealing. It's the fact that you are in the mindset somehow of the guy he's mocking or making fun of or commentating on. It's like if you watch a YouTube video commentating on a horrible movie or something, and then you like the commentary. Therefore, you like the bad movie he's commentating on. You are in the mindset of a fan of that horrible movie because you like the commentary making fun of that horrible movie. Doesn't make any sense.
This is like when you listen to, let's say, electric dance music, and there's like that one lyric in the song that gets repeated over and over again. Like there's some deep meaning behind that. It's like, no, it just sounds good. That's it. There's like some of the lyrics in, trying to remember, like Enigma, like some of that would have some meaning behind it, but it's mostly just there to sound cool and go with the music. And if they want to tell a story about people going on their power trips and this and that, fine. People enjoy music for whatever they want, or else they wouldn't be at a concert. Do you think there's all these rapists in the audience going, "Oh yeah, this is awesome. Yeah, I love this music."
No, I highly doubt that.
I'm gonna go out and rape some people. It's like, no.
Like all those guys in the audience. It's like a crowd of like 10,000 rapists there apparently.
Walking along to is just one facet of that after all. And just like that, the subject of rape has been displaced in such a way that it becomes appealing. I'm sure Scott Wayland, God rest his soul.
No.
No. It's the same argument that they did like back in the 90s or something about video games.
Yeah, I was about to say that.
No.
You're normalizing rape culture, whatever the hell that even means.
Come on now. I mean, have you seen the world? Like, you know how have you met another person or seen a TV show? Is Goblin Slayer the first anime you've ever seen or something?
Yeah,
Like,
I wonder
have you
if
just been watching just Pokemon this whole time?
I wonder if Mozart has been normalizing harpsichords.
Yes, that evil Mozart normalizing harpsichords.
Bach, you and your giant church organs, you're thinking us we should believe in God, even though he was a Protestant, but damn religious types and their religions.
Didn't intend for the song to have that effect. In fact, I think he wanted the opposite. To him, the song was an exploration of the evils of...
We don't care. We don't care what he wanted. He made a good piece of music. People liked it. End of story.
I mean, if anyone remembers, this is a commentary on Goblin Slayer.
Yeah. We're starting from music, which is also the same as anime, apparently.
violence and abuse of power. But to the audience, it only becomes that if you engage with it on a deeper level.
No, you engage with it on a moronic level or an interpretive level or a level that makes no goddamn sense except to you. And if you were to write an essay or go to your music teacher or your music history teacher, they would laugh at you. Some of them who are a little more artsy-fartsy would be like, oh, that's an interesting take. But they'd be like, what perspective are you taking? Like, it's not a feminist perspective, because there are actual interpretations of music with feminists in it.
Yeah.
But that would not be one of them. That would be like, what are you talking about? You'd have to really look at the lyrics and then disregard all the sounds, all the notes, all the music, the thing that makes the thing a thing, and just focus on the words and be like, well, out of context, yeah, that could mean that. I could read all kinds of gangster rap sentences that sound horrific. Like I just came from slaughtering a bunch of guys and driving my Rolls Royce and etc. Like, what?
Yeah. Pimping and murdering and drive-bys and dealing drugs. Those are on there.
Am I a mobster supervillain? Like, what's going on here? Do I have my own ring of drugs and men who are going to die for me? And I'm fought in wars with. Like, this makes no sense.
You start to analyze the lyrics. On a surface level, all Sex Type Thing is a really good jam, though in its defense, it is a very dark rock song, and because of that, it doesn't set the most joyful of tones. The same cannot be said for my next example.
Okay, so he admits, hey, if you just don't read too much into it, it's fine. It's like...
Yeah, it's a pretty good piece of music. I mean, music is far more abstract than like a show like Goblin Slayer.
Yes. So interpreting things from music is not unheard of. It's just you can't compare apples and oranges, and to go this far with supposed sexual lyrics because, I don't know, maybe he took a English lit or whatever course in university and they talked about this and he learned about this song. It's like, okay.
And he ran to go make a video about it.
How does this have anything to do with anime? I don't know.
That's Dragon Force?
I don't know. I don't know. I think it's probably the intro to a song or intro to a show. I'm surprised he got away with all this music because it's like,
there's no way. There's no. I think his. Maybe he doesn't monetize or something.
Yeah, maybe because this is be like flagged within seconds. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotta say that drummer's amazing. Holy crap!
Yeah, the band is pretty good. If it's Dragon Force, I think it's called Dragon Force or something. If it is, that band is pretty good. It's very extreme. The music is very extreme. You probably have to be have a taste for it or be in the mood for it. But they are very good at what they do.
This is Scars of Yesterday by Dragon Force of all bands. It's a song about a mentally disturbed warrior or marauder taking the virginity of someone who is violently trying...
Maybe it is. I certainly did not get any of that. Okay?
Yeah, I didn't either. That's what their songs sound like. It's about the being extreme. It's like if you've seen like a show that's just about being extreme up to the max, like to 11. That's what Dragon Force is, but in music form. Like, have you seen one of those over the top, like Expendables or Shoot 'em Up or one of those shamelessly over the top movies? If you turn all those movies and put them together and turn into music, that would be Dragon Force. So yeah, just a mentally disturbed Marauder too, not heroic in any way, right?
I mean, yeah, if you listen to, I remember people before they go into sports or competitions, they listen to like Megadeth or
Get pumped. You
Metallica.
get pumped.
Yeah, they want to get hyped. Yeah, they want to get going.
Yeah.
That's it. They don't care about the lyrics so much. They don't need to.
To stop him. It's probably the most narratively cohesive song Dragon Force have ever put out, in that it actually has a legible yarn instead of sounding like a Mad Libs version of a Robert Jordan book.
And also, I think Dragon Force is imitating that 80s style, like the edgy kind of 80s style, whatever it's called, maybe 80s, 90s, maybe 70s, where they sing about things that are disturbing and go against the grain and try to, disrupt your sensibilities. I mean, if you watch the show Metalocalypse, they tend to do that a lot. They tend to play into that and satirize
Oh, yeah.
that element of that kind of music, and they do it a lot. They do it very well.
Yeah,
They do it very
Nathan
well.
Explosion's just awesome.
Nathan Explosion, Roxo the Clown. I mean, all those bands, they do it very well. Then they always play on that sense of, we're going to make a song that's just there to be disturbing, but it's going to sound really good. I mean, the sense to destabilize your sensibilities.
But despite having a more concrete and disturbing narrative than most Dragon Force songs, Scars of Yesterday doesn't really deviate from the rest of their oeuvre on an aesthetic level. I think it's better than most Dragon Force songs, but you could imagine this playing over the final battle in a season of Ruby just as much as Through the Fire and Flames. Point being, even something as terrible as rape can still be presented in a way that is meant to be aesthetically pleasing.
Yes, I'm not disagreeing with you. However, not in this context. It's completely obvious what's happening here.
I'm even questioning the examples he gave, how that's making rape appealing, but definitely not in the context of Goblin Slayer. It's definitely not.
And let's also be clear about the Japanese culture. They have something for everyone in manga and anime, whether it's a fetish, whether it's a fantasy, it does not matter. There is something for everyone. And this was shown at 12:30 or after 12 on a weekend at night. Okay, this is not for general consumption.
It's like Adult Swim hours. That's
Essentially,
where
yeah.
it comes out.
This is true outside of the realm of music as well. Within pornography, a medium which exists almost exclusively for the
Back to pornography. Okay, Goblin Slayer is not a pornography. It's not even, what are they called? Like, I know there's another one. It's not hentai or whatever. It's
Ecchi.
Ecchi or something, where it's like they have a lot of perversion in it. It's not that either. There's no real perversion in Goblin Slayer. Anything that comes close to it is not appealing or sexualized in any way. It's disturbing and horrific every single time. The only instance, like I said, of something being sexualized and being made appealing is probably with the witch and maybe Farm Girl. When they have those, or Cowgirl. I think she's called Cowgirl. We have those fan service shots. But when those fan service shots come up, there aren't any goblins around. There's no threat of violence or anything like that. It's just a shot, and then we move on.
I think it's based off purely his speculation of what he thinks that people might be feeling. If they could get turned on by this, therefore it is this. It's like, well...
Someone. I mean, there's some weirdo out there. Who's bound to be, aroused by how disturbing and horrific that is portrayed.
Yeah, that is...
Most people don't.
That is the exception. That is not the blanket general rule you put on something.
And it's definitely not the writer's or creator's fault.
purpose of titillation, there is a phraseology dedicated to categorizing rape or rape-adjacent content. Have you ever heard of the phrase dubcon, short for dubious consent? How about panal? And it gets more explicit than that. Go to any hentai site and
Actually, I've never heard of these terms, and I don't know why we're talking about it.
I got some education here.
guarantee
Panal. Look up panal. What was it? A dubcon? A dubious consent? Or whatever. Like he's looking at. I told you. I'm pretty sure he looked up porn categories to argue this, and that's not even Goblin Slayer. It's not even in there. It's not, and if it is, then it's not shown, and it is not like fetishized or anything like that. It just happens. Things can happen. Bad things can happen. Things people find sexy or arousing, or things that are fetishized by some people happen in real life, and in horrific ways. It doesn't mean that you can't depict them.
Yeah,
it just means that they're not. You don't have to. When you depict them, they're just not necessarily sexy or sexualized.
Yeah, this is a story about a bunch of rookie adventurers getting trapped in a cave and then getting killed. Okay, and the reality of that, and then some guy comes in to save them called the Goblin Slayer. That's the first episode. Yes, there's a little bit of potential rape. We don't know. I think one of the women were already dead, and it's like, okay, they're raping a corpse. That's great, fantastic.
That's something the goblins would do, I think.
Yeah, it's like they're creatures. They're animals. It's like, okay, we get it.
Rape serves as a dedicated content category. There is such a thing as live-action pornography meant to simulate rape as well.
There is such a thing as live-action pornography to simulate rape. Okay, I mean, there's a flavor of everything for everyone. I get it.
But again, Goblin Slayer. It's not pornography. It's not even the other etchy. It's not even. It doesn't even have like perverted. The perversion fan service elements aren't even a prevailing element of it. I mean, it happens every once in a while, but it's not like a constant thing where they have comedic instances with boobs or something. That
we sort of
series have
a blanket. We just call that fan service, whether it's explicit or not. It's just part of the culture. There's always the guy with the bleeding nose as soon as he gets near a woman. These are tropes in anime that are so redundant. And
even in like ones made for children, there's fan service in there. It's not as explicit, not nearly, but they tend to be in there even if it's for children.
Yeah, so you really have to focus on the scene to get your argument across that this is X. And if he doesn't do that, because obviously YouTube probably wouldn't allow that or whatever, he has to obfuscate it. He has to talk about other things. He has to bring up other ideas. It's like, okay, great. You've talked about music. You've talked about rape. Now you're talking about
pornography.
Pornography rape. I'm like, okay. We're going to come around eventually.
And connect this to Goblin Slayer, please.
Please.
Long story short, in art, the subject of rape and an intent to be appealing can go hand in hand. So the question we're left with...
It can. Yes, anything can go hand in hand.
Absolutely can. And there are categories where people could have that, or dubcon and all that stuff. You can have rape and porn. But Goblin Slayer, again, is not a porn.
Is the following. Are the rape scenes in Goblin Slayer presented in a way which either detracts from the horror of the situation or makes the situation more aesthetically pleasing than it would naturally be?
Or it makes it horrific.
Okay, and look at the way these women are dressed, first of all. If this were a more perverted show or something like that, you would have standard Western female gear. It's has become a trope in Western fantasy, where like the female warrior is nothing but a male bikini or something.
Right.
Or wearing something that is revealing or scantily clad or something like that. But look at how the women are dressed here. They're dressed very modest and conservative. Even the women who are not the priestess, even the mage, even the fighter, they're all dressed and they're all fully clothed. There's not even a hint of perversion here. They just happen to be women. I guess that's what he takes umbrage with. The closest thing you get is with the mage having like a little was a boob window sort of thing, but again, it's just very, very mild. And
even then, as I believe you stated, the witches later in the show, they're designed to be seductive. So
yeah, the one other witch that we see, like she's clearly a witch, and she's the only other one. I mean, they go over the top with her. She takes out stuff. She's got scrolls from between her breasts and thing. I mean, it's very overt.
Yeah. So this is a rookie magician, and that's obviously a much more experienced one. So that's part of the theme. It's part of the world. I'm really not offended by women wearing female clothing as a fashion sense of the times, or what your role is, what your class is. This is really reaching to find something sexually provocative.
And again, keep in mind this is an anime. If they don't need to have an excuse to dress up women or men for that matter in provocative clothing or revealing clothing or anything like that. They chose not to in this situation. And if this were any standard anime, it would be very different. They probably would have something more revealing, but they didn't. They're dressed rather conservatively. They're covered from head to toe, with the exception of the mage's boob window.
Even when they get their clothing ripped off, there's always just enough clothing to cover up the nipples, to cover up the vagina. It's just, it's not an adult show. It's trying to be.
It's not sexualized. I mean, it's not sexy or sexualized. It's like I said before. It's depicted as highly disturbing. It's highly disturbing, relative to the show and everything. It's just not arousing. There's no moaning or anything like that. There's no what you would see in a pornography where you keep trying to connect it to. It's just violence and assault, mainly done to depict to the audience how threatening and how violent and how dangerous these goblins actually are, as compared to how they were thought of at the beginning of the episode, which they were thought of as something easy to get rid of, like getting rid of rats or something, which turns out apparently not to be the case.
Definitely not, no.
Yeah.
Let's take a closer look. Leading up to this scene, the adventure party, consisting of a swordsman, a magician, a fighter, and a priest, has entered the goblin cave and finds itself woefully underprepared. The wizard and the swordsman are both taken out of action, resulting in the female fighter having to protect the priestess. She manages to take care of a few smaller goblins, but is outgunned by a hobgoblin. Now, believe it or not, the questionable presentation comes into play as early as this. Following this moment, the fighter has her ankle either twisted or broken, is tossed against a wall causing her to bleed from her mouth, and tossed against the wall once more, resulting in a cracking sound. She is then thrown onto the ground, whereupon she is savagely beaten by a group of goblins wielding not just clubs, but knives and axes.
Is anyone turned on yet?
No.
Because, I don't know, having a bunch of people getting butchered by a bunch of animals is not setting the stage for...
I mean, I guess it's a fetish somewhere.
I guess? Maybe if he talked about that particular fetish as opposed to porn rape fantasy, I just don't get it.
But again, it's not a general thing, and Goblin Slayer isn't depicting this as sexy. If they did, they'd probably be showing her being beaten or chopped up or whatever. And this is completely glossing over what happened to that male fighter guy. Same thing happened to him, except they showed him getting his hand chopped off and stuff. Well, they didn't show it, but they allude to it. Like they show them holding down his hand and then raising the knife or the axe or whatever, and then coming down with it, but don't show his hand flying off. But it's pretty close.
Yeah, so this is...
Bad things happen to him too.
Yeah, this is the whole scene I was talking about before. It's like they show him like beating her with knives and axes, but she's not cut up. It's like, what's going on here?
Yeah, I think there's I think it goes into that actually. He argues that.
Well, that's a good observation, but it doesn't make any sense to what his point is, but okay.
As well. That is a lot of physical abuse to take. And yet, when her clothes get torn off, almost no sign of physical damage remains. All that's left is light abrasion, the blood is gone, and the knives and axes seemingly never punctured her. The only blood that is shown...
Okay, so how does that make it attractive?
And I don't think it does. Well, it could actually, in my... I would argue that it makes it less attractive, that it keeps it away from being sexualized, because the last thing what I believe the author is trying to do, what he's trying to do is make seem the goblins as horrific evil monsters. The last thing that you would want to do in that situation if you were the writer would be to sexualize it in any way, make it appealing in any way in that manner. And what I want to bring up is the American slasher film, is that they kind of... Yeah, the American slasher film is known for its big tough guys like Jason Voorhees and Michael Myers. But another element that is consistent in that genre of movie is sexualized violence. It's it's very common to have blood spray over some attractive woman's breasts or something in that sort of genre, and that makes it more sexy because that's how it's a mix of sex and violence, and that people find that attractive in the way it's depicted. So here, if she were bloody and getting beat up and abused and all that stuff, some people might actually find that more people would probably find that sexualized or appealing in some way, based on how people react to that sort of element in the American slasher movie, because it's a very popular, very consistent, element in those movies.
Right. And the general depiction of sex and violence or nudity and violence is generally seen as a shock, a surprise. Like, whoa, this guy just got stabbed, or whoa, this woman's topless, or whatever. And you combine those two things, you can have an association of ideas of sexuality and fear. And you're going to get an emotional reaction of some sort. Some people it won't. Some people be like, that's kind of silly, this is kind of tacky, etc. So I can see that angle, but that doesn't happen here.
Yeah, it definitely does not happen here. And also keep in mind that we know how strong goblins are. Goblins are as strong as children, like maybe 10 or so. So even if the goblins are hitting her with all their might, there might not be that much damage. It takes a lot to kill a person under what they do. Even if they have axes, it might be blunt. Remember, the goblins steal. They're not going around and stealing like giant, like a high-class weapons that the king might use. They're stealing things that people have discarded, or like a farmer left out on the porch one night. They don't have the best of utensils. So even though they're stabbing her with knives and swords and chopping her up with axes, they're probably blunt, and they're not being used with the strength of a man. They're being used with the strength of a child behind it.
After the fighter is undressed is the result of a puncture wound, which is shown in extreme close-up. This cut is notably isolated from the rest of the scene to an absurd extent. The scene does not provide another wide shot of the fighter after this, with only another extreme close-up of one of her eyes being given before she exits the scene entirely. When we see her again near the end of the episode, all signs of the puncture wounds have disappeared while the priestess's wounds are still fully visible. It's not until the end of the episode, when she's clothed again...
You mean the puncture wounds that you just showed? They were there. I guess you didn't see it or something, but they were there.
I believe that was the implication, that he's mounting her and she's on all fours. And
it's the implication. The goblin is beginning the rape.
Right.
That he wants to talk about something.
And then it just cuts, and you're like, oh, okay, well.
Yeah, I mean, it's not sexy in any way. It's not sexualized. It's something that happens.
And that her wounds are at their most visible. The effect of all this...
Yeah, I'd like to see if they actually animated that. I don't think people would find that attractive at all.
Yeah, I don't think so either. It's just more disturbing, more...
Yeah, that would be really like, whoa, this is creeping me out, how disturbing. Whereas if you just imply it, it's like, oh, that's what happened. Holy crap. These guys got to die. These guys are a problem, etc. So it raises the stakes. It says... This
isn't that bad of a... I mean, this isn't like that adult of a show, and it isn't a porno, so there's no real reason why they would show that.
So to raise the stakes, saying, if someone doesn't stop this, this is going to keep happening. And with this actual inclusion, they actually procreate through this process. So it's like, holy crap, this is really nefarious. So
it's not done for no reason. It's not done for its own sake. It's done because it's part of their story. It's part of the plot. It's part of what makes them so dangerous.
Right. So when that's why I sort of see Goblin Slayer when he walks in, kind of like a Deus Ex Machina. He just walks in. I am the best person for this problem. Here we go.
For this specific problem. He's not even good. He's not even good at a lot of other things.
Yeah.
This specific problem you're having a problem with, I'm the guy for this specific problem.
Yeah, so I kind of see that, like, okay, but then of course you're expecting that because the title of the show is called Goblin Slayer. So you're like, all right, he just walked out of nowhere. He's okay, here we go. This is wrong. This is why he got caught. This is why he's going to die. She's going to die right here. She's poisoned. You're like, it's like, oh shit, okay, he's in charge now.
He knows what he's doing. Yeah, he knows what he's doing. He knows exactly what he's doing.
Is that the image of the fighter being bloodied and the fighter being naked are never conflated on screen. We either see blood or the entirety of her body, and never both. If the main purpose of this scene...
Except when she was punctured, okay, but what is he getting at? We don't see the entirety of her body and no blood? Like, what is... So what? What's the association?
I would argue that, like I said earlier, I think that makes the point that they were trying to stay away from this being sexualized as much as possible, because if you showed blood while she's being stripped, that's conflating. It's what's a sexualized violence is what you would find in something like a American slasher fic.
Right.
Is to communicate how dark this series is going to be, that there are no restraints on serious subject matter. Why make this concession?
Okay, well, there's an argument against you, sir. Why make a concession when you're trying to depict sexualized violence? Maybe it's not sexualized violence. Maybe you're reading too much into that, and the implication is that's the beautiful thing about comics or anime or writing. you can imply so many things. And if you're too stupid to figure that out, then maybe the narrative is too smart for you. And that's not the narrative's fault. That's the audience's fault. That's where I say, okay, maybe it is subjective to a certain degree, but not because that the intention of the author was X or what you interpreted as Y. It's just because you just can't understand what's in front of your face.
Exactly. And even in the manga series, it's even worse. It's even less sexualized because not only does this all happen in the first story, but the author gives us like a little backstory to each of these characters. Like the mage was one of the top tier of her class. She was revered as being so young yet able to cast a certain spell more times than she was able to, which more normal people her age were able to. And they presented her with a special magic wand, which the goblins then snapped in half. And the female fighter showed her trying to live up to the expectations of her father, and it showed all of these backstories just to make it more sad, make it more tragic. But and it took away to that doesn't make it sexualized or more sexy or anything like that. It makes it tragic, and it feeds into what the author seemingly was trying to do, was make this whole scene incredibly tragic, because these deaths and what happens to these adventurers haunt the priestess throughout the series. She tends to think back on this moment, and sometimes she has survivor's guilt about being the only one to make it out alive, or not alive, but only one to make it out relatively intact.
No idea. I doubt this was done for the sake of the artist's convenience either, as blood and wound continuity in the show is actually fairly good across the board. At the end of the day, all this achieved...
So, again, what's the problem with her getting nail marks in her ass and then not showing it afterward? I don't get it. The continuity's still there. She still got cut. Didn't magically heal itself. What is your problem, sir? It wasn't shown enough? Is that it? He wants more violence? It's like, okay.
He wants more violence, I guess.
So would I. I want more violence. That's why I watch these shows.
Is making the image of the fighter's naked body more palatable than it naturally should have been.
Okay, so he wants it to be more gruesome. I don't see
it to be more gruesome.
Yeah, I don't see a problem with that. Yeah, I don't see
palatable to me.
I don't see a problem with that argument, but it's not helping his argument. It's like, yeah, we want to see more. It's like, yeah, but they didn't. So it's not this sexual violent thing you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned earlier, it's not, nudity does not make someone sexualized. It does not make something sexy. It's how it's depicted. Like if you a woman wearing a white T-shirt that's getting wet, like they said in the Saw franchise, like just get rid of that because that's sexy. You don't want sexy. You want horrific. So they actually put her in the nude, which tanked the sexiness and sex appeal of that scene. So nudity can make things less sexy at times. So nudity does not make something sexualized, and nudity does not necessarily make things sexy.
Yeah, there was a whole art form to being sexy, and I'm not implying I know this, but women have an innate skill in this, so always ask a lady how these things work. Probably not a guy. I don't know what that guy was that was a woman, but he actually had more understanding of what the sexiness was as opposed to this gentleman. But, some guys are smart. Some guys are girls. Who knows?
That's a weird thing to do in a scene where she is being sexually violated. Similar techniques are used when the goblins are assaulting the wizard, but it does feel less deliberate in her case.
Yeah, she gets stabbed in the stomach, and then it's like she's dead. Is that sexy, guys? I don't know.
I guess you have a stabbed in the stomach fetish or something.
I don't know. I guess.
There probably is, actually.
Yeah, well.
I'm sure somewhere.
Something for everyone.
She is stabbed in the abdomen early on, a very weird moment where the bleeding immediately stops, and she goes from screaming to being passed out in the span of a single second. When we return...
What do you want, the blood to just continue gushing? This is not Kill Bill. This is not Kill Bill, sir.
When you get stabbed in the chest, you should just keep gorging blood.
It's a constant stream of blood. It's like you fill up a balloon full of like of spaghetti sauce and poke the hole in the bottom. That's what it should be. It's constant.
You're laying on your back. Why is it shooting out like a canyon?
That's how biology works.
Why
the reason why she stopped moving is because they used poison daggers. Okay, they're poisoned. They're poisoned with, like, I think herbs and their own urine and their own feces mixed with other toxins. So who knows what the toxins were? Maybe there's a paralytic in there. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. But plus, that would sort of defeat the purpose of keeping females to procreate. So it's kind of counterproductive to what they're trying to do.
They don't keep them all. I mean, there's a scene, in fact, where they take them in and they do what they usually do, and then they burn one to death, just without her ever giving birth. So they don't keep them all. They're very cruel. They're not very smart. They want to have their fun before anything else. I think even one of the books they said that they want to satiate their impulses before anything else happens. You know, they put their own impulses and pleasures first.
There's no particular reason until you get to the older ones or the more adult ones. They have the shaman and the etc.
To her later, the wound has been sealed, but the bloody stain still remains. As the goblins begin to...
What is the big deal with this blood, man? Like, what is he getting off on? I don't get it.
He wants like a constant gush of blood or something. Why would that
tear her
help?
clothes off, the scene quickly moves to a different shot, one in which both instances of blood on her are blocked, and the only part of her body that moves is her chest. Don't forget that the wizard is unconscious when this happens. After the titular goblin slayer arrives, we get a wide shot of the wizard in which the blood on her abdomen is fully obscured. Moments later, when the
I mean, the blood that I saw on her abdomen, that fully obscured blood, it's right there. I can see it. You can, I mean, look at it. It's right there. If you want to look at the blood on her abdomen, it's right there for you to see. It's just lightly in the shadows.
Yeah, this whole shot is to establish that she's done for, and it's a mercy to end her life.
She's dying.
Yeah,
she's not even unconscious. She's just in so much pain that she can hardly move. That's actually a pretty common anime thing. The character's in so much pain or has been violated in such a way, either mentally or physically, that they can barely register their surroundings. So it's pretty common as far as I've seen.
Emphasis is on her suffering. Shadows which were not there previously are cast on her breasts. I think this cut, which is the very last above the bust visual of the wizard, is the only one in the entire episode which does the gruesome nature of the sexual violence full justice.
What sexual violence?
I mean, come on. I mean, come on. He wants the shadows to be like gone all the time, so we can see her breasts all the time, and that's less sexual in his mind, I guess.
I didn't see any sexual violence. I saw a stab. I saw tearing off her clothes, and that was it.
Yeah, and then the Goblin Slayer chased them away.
That was it.
They might have raped her a little bit. I'm not really sure. I forgot.
Yeah, it's possible.
If they got that far.
It's not clearly depicted. So if it's not clearly depicted, you can't make any conclusion.
Yeah.
You can imply it, which is good to imply things, but you can't come to a conclusion of what was actually happening.
Let's expand on the issue of framing a little more, because this is where things get really ugly.
Oh my god, we're talking about framing. I'm looking at this girl with giant eyes. And this girl, if you understand this blonde girl in the cave more, you'll understand it's really about sexual violence. Like, oh yeah, okay.
The cut where the fighter has her clothes ripped off is very brief. It lasts for approximately 2 seconds, but those 2 seconds are unbelievably poorly conceptualized.
What? It's just them tearing off her clothes, because that's what goblins kind of do.
The tearing off of her clothes is very poorly conceptualized. Does anyone know what that means? Anyone? What the hell is he talking about?
How is this poorly conceptualized? You want?
What do you want? You want the guy to you need like 20 frames of animation to show the one layer of clothing. Then you need another 20 frames. Like,
does he want him to show more of that? Because he says that it's really short, and then he said it's poorly conceptualized. Does he want like a longer scene of them ripping off her clothes?
I mean, if it's something is poorly depicted, how can you start making deductions or any sort of inferences regarding, oh, this is what's really happening? Like, think about that. I can't clearly see what's happening in this shot, therefore it's sexual violence. What if they're just tearing off their clothes? Because that's it. Because
you can have clothes being torn off. It happens a lot without it being sexualized or sexy.
Because they're wild animals and they just want to tear to pieces, and they don't get that far, or they start laughing because
this is not too different than if she were surrounded by wolves and the wolves are just tearing off her clothes with their teeth, ripping at her with their teeth. It's kind of the same thing.
a bunch of wild animals going at it, doing whatever they want. It's like, yeah, they're in control. They've knocked her down. They've broken her bones or whatever. She can barely fight back, and they're just playing around. We don't know exactly what happens. It's a 2-second shot. Come on.
He even says it's short, so...
What's the big deal? I don't get it, but okay.
I don't know what his problem is.
Striking thing here is the manner in which the goblins are positioned. Even though the previous...
Really? The way the goblins are positioned. This is so striking. It's just... Whew.
I guess he's arguing that it would be better if all we could see were goblins, and that's it. We could just... A goblin gets his butt too close to the camera, and that's all.
It's just... Oh. What is he going on about now?
This cut showed that the goblins are huddled around her so closely that she was bathed entirely in shadows. Within the span of absolutely no time at all, one cut to the next, the goblins have spread out so far that the fighter's body can now be seen in full.
They're not bricks. I mean,
what is he going on about? Like he's doing every second. He's like, okay, this second this happens, this second that happens.
Goblins can move pretty quickly. They're kind of agile.
They display. They obscure the light, and all of a sudden they're all around her. It's like, we got it. Yeah.
That's how this happens. That's what makes it more terrifying. Being closed in and surrounded by enemies by yourself. You can feel the same terror that she's feeling at that moment.
Yeah, I'm trying to see the sex angle. Or the sexuality angle. I just can't.
Goblins tear the fighter's clothes off with a seeming complete lack of force, just so we can see her breasts bouncing around as she rides.
No, her whole body is spinning around. I've seen plenty of anime and manga. When they want to show that, they show it very, very clearly.
It's an anime. If they want to sexualize this scene, they don't need an excuse. It would be overtly sexualized.
Yeah. Like that scene he just shot of that girl jumping down the stairs. Like that was like, okay, yeah, this is the focus of the shot. We get it.
Yeah, and that was just her running down the stairs. That's an anime of showing a girl just running down the stairs, and that was pretty sexualized.
Yeah.
If they wanted to sexualize this, you would know. You wouldn't need some guy to explain it to you.
Yeah. Well, not him at least.
Yeah, especially not him.
Very next cut, the focal point is a foot stomping the fighter's face into the dirt. 2 cuts later, the same angle is shown at a slightly wider perspective, and something very odd has occurred.
What is your point, sir? He's describing the scene. It's like, yes, and...
They're wild animals. They want to show displays of dominance. They're not trying to go to someone's safe space or something. They're wild animals.
They're hurting her, yes.
That's what wild animals do. They show dominance because you need to show dominance to survive in the wild.
The goblin stomping on the fighter's head is now behind her. This is one facet of the same trick being played again. The goblin...
What trick? What is
Goblins can't move, I guess.
I don't get... Like, what?
This is the second argument he's made that can only stem from him being baffled that goblins can have the ability to move.
It's a trick. It's just...
They could teleport or something.
I don't get it. Yeah.
are spread out in a way that is diegetically awkward just so we can see more of the fighter's body.
Diegetically awkward. Okay, yeah, that's not incorrect, but what is your point? Again, what are you getting at, sir?
Speaking of which, the pose the fighter is forced into in this cut is mind-blowing in how shameless it is.
No, it's pretty clear what they're trying to do. It's not a big...
I mean, they're trying to make it so that you can visually see what they're trying to do, and then you can see the terror and the horror that's coming.
Yeah, they don't literally show you. They go through the steps of what could be happening, and you're like, oh, I get it. Oh, I see what's going on. That's bad.
Does he want them to show us the rape? I mean,
like do you want like a zoom in? Like what?
that would be closer to sexualization.
Do you want a sign saying we will now rape the female?
Get some different camera angles.
Like,
on this.
I think we all know what's going on here, but apparently he has to spell it out.
Face down and butt up, the goblins must be big fans of Two Live Crew. It doesn't even make sense.
What? Is that a joke? Like what's Two Live Crew? I have no idea what that reference means. Okay, forget it. I'm just curious.
For the goblins to put her in this position because they're all too short to have sex with her if her pelvis is raised this high.
Okay, so now he's
Obviously,
arguing.
they can because the goblin is that high.
So now he's arguing they're not going to have sex because it's impossible now.
You see the goblin that is the right height? He's not the right height, actually. Your eyes are deceiving you.
Nah,
It's a trick.
whatever.
It's not done for the sake of the hobgoblin either, as he disappears from the scene entirely after he tosses the fighter to the floor. Reconciling this pose is nearly impossible. It is transparently obvious that what this cut does is attempt to add titillation to a scene which should not have it.
I am titillated by what exactly in this scene?
Yeah, exactly what is sexy or
What
sexualized?
what is the nape of her back? Like what? I don't get it. Like what is turning me on here? And guys, what is? What?
How?
What is he talking about?
Explain, like, just because we could see her body. People tend to have bodies, right?
Even if
This is
she
not
was naked, I'd be like, well, this is horrific.
not arousing.
This is
This is,
bad.
yeah, it's horrible. This is terrible. This would be painting to me, even if she were naked. And I think they do make her naked in a few minutes here, but it's just showing me how horrible and horrific and overall monstrous these goblins are.
This is exacerbated by the strange, thong-like length of cloth, which is the final bit of clothing the goblins tear off.
Okay.
Not only is it...
You see how the goblin is totally not tall enough? It's a lie.
Yeah. Well, I guess the tearing of the clothing is titillating. I don't get it.
vaguely suggestive of lingerie, it also hides just how forced the fighter's pose is in this cut.
Okay.
Underwear exists in fantasy lands. I mean,
this guy is trying very hard to not make much sense. I just like, dude, what? Where are you going? As you can see, she's being raped. In case no one grasped the imagery.
yeah, the Goblin Slayer goblins, they should have been like very benevolent and kind.
Apparently,
evil
this
creatures.
is an attractive version of rape. I guess.
Apparently so.
I don't get it, but he's saying
it
so.
might be in Britain. I don't know. Maybe it is in Britain.
You know, if he established it as a niche or as a fetish, then be like, oh, okay. But he just says there are versions of pornographic rape. It's like, okay, great. Can you give us the elements of pornographic rape and we can apply it to this? Like, if he actually did that, then we'd say, oh, you were referring to this 1984 episode of, I don't know, whatever rape porn. And then he compared the scenes. Then we'd be like, aha, this is where you're getting...
now we see. Yeah, now we see where you're coming from.
Yeah, then we'd be like, at least we know where he's coming from. He'd still be way off course, but at least our brains would line up with something.
Once the piece of cloth is gone and her silhouette is no longer broken up, it becomes clear that major artistic license had to be taken to have the fighter's butt, legs, and breasts all visible at the same time.
Major artistic license.
I've seen quite a lot of anime where they don't take lots of artistic licenses to depict whatever the hell they want in any way they want. So this just goes to show that they could have done this a lot easier, and they didn't. They could have just shown her on her back, getting her legs spread, clothes torn, shown everything, but they didn't.
It would have been more explicit that way. In fact, this is actually more, relatively and comparably more. It's more concealing because you can't really see anything else. If she were on her back with her legs open, her legs being spread by a goblin or something, then it would be more explicit. If a goblin was, if she were on her stomach and a goblin were crawling on top of her or something, then it would be more explicit. This makes it less sexualized.
I've seen dresses that reveal more than this on women. So it's like, okay, well, this is part of it.
Yeah, Hollywood stars have come on to red carpet events wearing with less than this, like revealing less than this, or more than this, revealing more than this.
The breasts are also the real kicker here, if you ask me.
The breasts. It's clearly all about the titties, guys.
Yeah, that's it.
It's all it comes down
you
to.
You barely see anything, but that's what's really all about.
I think she has them, and they're somewhat there. And you know what? Part of me was probably turned on. I just wasn't aware of it. Now that he mentions it, yeah, you know what? Boobs are kind of attractive in any context. It just snaps in my head. I'm a warm-blooded male. See boobs, get aroused. Doesn't matter if said boobs are getting raped or whatever. No context, just boobs.
The fighter's breasts are portrayed as being fairly large for most of the episode, but once her clothes...
Not to anime standards, but okay.
Yeah, not nearly 10. I mean, those are like smaller on anime.
Yeah, I'm not
but
gonna argue that. I'm just saying it's just I don't know where he's getting this reference, but it's like okay, fine, maybe she is more developed. I don't.
That
care.
is a trope, though. That is a common. That's an actual common trope.
Yeah.
It's made to allow the audience to, at a visual level, depict what kind of character these people are. Like usually, your mages, your priestesses, and things, they have smaller breasts, while the fighter types tend to be on the larger side. It's an actual trope. You could look it up on TV tropes. But it's an actual thing. It's an actual thing.
Off, they suddenly expand into giant anime balloon breasts. This change is...
I don't think this guy's ever seen breasts. And why he's talking about... Those are not giant anime balloon breasts, just so you know.
Yeah, they are not. They're relatively normal size. Like
they're not even on the radar. They don't even register, okay?
It's fairly egregious while she's being held down, but it's...
Her breasts are now egregious because she's being... Oh, Jesus.
Women have breasts. Does he know that women have breasts? Like
they're kind of extreme. Like I hate the word egregious because it means the ultimate form of negative connotation, but it's like they're kind of egregious. It's like, no, dude, just use the proper words.
At its worst while her clothes are being torn off. This scene is then closed out by a very unfortunate cut of half of the fighter's face. Her mouth is shaped and cropped in a manner which results in it being interpretable as a smile at a glance. She's also...
What? How? Explain to me how this is in any way resembling a smile. People can have their mouth open and not being smiling. How is this a smile?
Oh my God.
I don't understand this. How is this a smile?
This is horrific. This is absolutely horrific. This guy's like, she's enjoying
his description of this. Yeah, his description of this is horrific. Yeah.
Well, that too. As you can see, this woman getting raped is enjoying it. It's like,
yeah, look, you know how traumatized, like traumatized look she has on her
crying,
face.
she's bleeding, she has her bones broken.
It's a clear traumatized depiction of pleasure. So pleasurable that she's crying and drooling and being traumatized.
Clearly, every guy who likes boobs is turned on right now.
What did this guy smoke?
He's depicting rape like this is attractive. Like, as you can see, she's smiling. It's like, oh, really?
Okay, yeah, that's totally a smile.
Drooling now from the same mouth that, as you might remember, magically stopped bleeding earlier. And there you have it. Do I think the scene is
Wait, magically stop bleeding? You can stop bleeding. I mean, it's because you get a cut doesn't mean it's just going to be gushing blood forever.
Yeah.
So you have a disease. Like if that happens to you, you should probably go to the doctor. This thing's called your blood can clot. If you bleed from the mouth because you've been punched or something, it's not something that bleeds forever. It can close up fairly quickly depending on where it is. It'll still hurt, but you can wipe your mouth and there's a good chance that you won't bleed anymore unless you get hit again, of course.
It's a very strange thing. Oh, she's not bleeding. It's like, yeah, well, she's drooling. She's in pain. She's not moving her head. She's being forced against her will. Smiling.
The only thing he's seen is Kill Bill or something, or there's kung fu movies where they get cut and it's just a continuous spray of blood.
See, no, I think it's terrible. But do I think it sexualizes the events that occur in it? Absolutely.
Okay, you haven't proven that to us, but all you've said is that he doesn't find it attractive. So he hasn't explained the words he used. He's defined sexy as attractive, whatever. He hasn't actually properly associated that with the evidence in the show. And he's not even attracted to it. So where is his opinion coming from? It's not coming from him. Who is he representing in this analysis? This is what I really don't like. It's like he's fighting for an ideology that's not in his own brain. And he's trying to rationalize it by flubbing words together, slowing down scenes, making us believe that the girl's enjoying it. It's like, this is really wrong.
This is a huge stretch.
This is just sad. It's like, look, sir, there are essays. We learn to write them. We have thesis statements, we have points, and then we have conclusion. That's what you do. Use evidence, back it up.
The best thing he has as evidence are literal pornography and music, which is a medium that is highly interpretive.
I think we could all agree, even he, that this is a rape scene. However, we cannot agree that it is a sexualized rape scene.
Yeah, or attractive or sexy in any way.
I don't think rape is ever sexualized. I don't think I've ever seen a depiction in movies where I'm like, oh wow, this is hot. This is great. This is really doing it for me. God. Maybe he should watch some actual some French cinema where they actually have that depictions, and it's like, look, dude, just watch it. Like, does this turn you on?
That is the distinction that people who defend this scene get hung up on, I think. The generic elements of a rape scene are all here. Generic as in the adjectival form of genre, that is. There is screaming, writhing, use of force by assailants, etc. And logic dictates that this makes the events portrayed unpalatable. But what makes something either appealing or appalling in a piece of art isn't its generic elements, it's the tone and the framing.
Okay, so what is the tone and framing of this that makes it attractive?
He's going to have to tell me, because I have no idea.
I really want to know.
To me, this is just a scene that's horrific and painting the goblins as these irredeemable, evil creatures. That's all this scene says to me. This is like, oh man, this is dark. This is disturbing. That's the only thing that came to my mind when I saw this.
It's horrific. There are two groups. One wants to kill they both want to kill each other. One of them wants to rape and kill. That's what happened. One of them got almost instantly defeated and raped. And then they got saved by Mr. Goblin Slayer. That's the scene. Whether it's depicted as, even if this was sexualized, it would be confusing. It'd be like, why are you sexualizing this scene?
That would actually be bad writing.
We'd be like, this is awkward. This is like, this is not like it would throw me out of the scene, because you'd be like, is this bad? Why is it being? Yeah.
I mean, the whole point of this is to show how horrible the goblins are, so we can set up the rest of the series. That way we can cheer on Goblin Slayer no matter what he does to these things, because they're totally, completely, 100% without any sort of redeemable qualities to them. Even the children will watch you take pity on them, and then watch you turn your back, and then get a rock and bash your brains in.
Yeah, that was probably the only scene where like, whoa, maybe you're going too far. It's like, no, believe me, this is what's going to happen. They're going to come after you.
There might be one good goblin out there somewhere, but until then, I'll just keep killing them all. Yeah. It doesn't really matter.
Framing of these scenes lean a little too heavily towards reinforcing positives in my eyes. The next thing you might ask yourself is,
what is he talking about? Reinforcing positives? Like,
what positives? What is positive about the scene other than Goblin Slayer comes in and kills all the goblins? It gives you a very nice feeling of catharsis once you see all these horrific, evil creatures die.
We need these scenes to show us the stakes and the consequences of what these creatures are. If they were depicted as sexualized or doing this for the good of their tribe or whatever, it'd be like, okay, you might have some concern for their existence. But the majority of people who see this, who see a bunch of people get killed and raped, see this as horrific. If you want to interpret that as something else, you're free to do so. But the rest of us who actually saw what was on the screen was like, this is bad, this is violent, this is bad.
This is horrible and disturbing.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't say it was like they shouldn't do this. I would never say that, because this served the purpose he needed it to serve. It served the purpose of showing us how terrible these goblins are and why the Goblin Slayer is the way he is and why he uses the methods he does.
If they wanted to humanize a rapist or not, they wouldn't use a bunch of goblins. They would use a talking, rational mind, and then they would show the monster that he is. It would still be a horrific story about a bunch of monsters. It would just be a more dramatic one we can identify with, because they're people. We would be disgusted by this person, but it would be something we could identify with on some human level. But we don't get that. We get a bunch of not mindless, a bunch of non-communicative feral creatures that are nothing but a thing to be purged. We get the Goblin Slayer to do that job, and that's the whole story. The whole 12 episodes, I think it is.
Yeah, just him fighting goblins.
Yeah,
in
that's the
various
story.
scenarios.
And we needed this first episode to launch us into the world of, oh, wow, goblins, that like, stupid little creatures, those guys are really actually bad. They're not just
and
annoying. They're really, really bad. Like, imagine if they
really bad.
imagine they told a story of slimes and they would run around and start dissolving your body or whatever. Like, that'd be horrific, right?
Yeah, that'd be like a nightmare scenario.
Yeah, but that's what slimes are. If they actually took like Slime Slayer, and that was the story of a bunch of like Dragon Quest slimes running around eating your teeth and dissolving all the hard parts of your body, and you're like you're basically this decrepit, destroyed person. That'd be holy crap. That'd be disgusting. And people would want to die. They want to end their life. This one, bunch of guys, bunch of little green dudes with knives and spears and whatever, trying to rape and kill because they're feral animals. It's like, okay, good. I understand it. I understand the genre. I understand, the RPG world, that you have all these creatures like rats and goblins and kobolds and all these other mystical creatures. Like, all right, what would be a visual, real depiction of that? How would that society survive? They'd have to steal.
That would be interesting.
They'd have to steal.
How they lived and everything.
They'd have to procreate some way. They'd have to do all these things. This is what this is.
But that's not what Goblin Slayer does. In fact, it goes out of its way several times to prove to the audience that Goblin Slayer is correct, that they are irredeemable creatures in every sense of the word. That there's the most humanized creature, the most humanized goblin that they've done in the entire series was the Goblin Lord. And because they showed us his backstory, how he developed and from when he was a kid, how he was clever and a survivalist and fought back against the adventurers who came into his cave and killed all of his friends or whatever. But even he, at the very end, he was completely 100% evil, irredeemable slimeball. There's nothing appealing about him in any way. He was just an evil goblin that just happened to be in the leadership position.
I'm trying to remember Berserk. A lot of people are bringing that up in the chat. And there's this scene when, God, I can't remember the villain's name, but he becomes the evil creature. Griffith, yeah, he rapes Seska and what have you.
Yeah.
At that point, you identify with him as this amazing knight, and he was cool. At that point, yep, he's the villain. We get it.
Oh yeah, I mean that's the. I think the trope is called a moral event horizon. You cross the moral event horizon where you do something so horrible. Your villain does something so horrific, so evil that there's no coming back. There's no redeeming that guy. Yeah, that's what Griffith does.
So, and we don't need to delve into. I mean, I think she was actually topless, and we see her getting raped and all that stuff. Like, we get it. We don't need to analyze the scene. The scene is for shock value. The whole scene is kind of bizarre because it's all about these devils come back and they grant him this power, and they're all just watching this, and he's like frolicking in his control, and he's just going wild. It's like, oh, this is really bad, and then Guts nearly gets killed and gets a mark on him, and all this bad stuff happens. That's the precursor to everything that happens in Berserk. Berserk is still going on. That manga is huge. So these stories can have a lot of value regardless of their adult themes. What makes them good stories? And you needed that degree of adult content, violence, sex, etc. Of course, magic was crazy in Berserk. There's all kinds of magical creatures and beings and wonderful things like fairies and witches and have you. So that's part of creating a worthwhile story. You need to have these elements outside of the titillation of violence, like Guts swinging a gigantic sword and doing all these crazy maneuvers that normal people wouldn't. So this is that version in a smaller form, simpler story in Goblin Slayer. The enemy are goblins. They're bad. They rape and they kill. Ta-da. Are they sexualized? No.
No, none the least little bit at all.
Did the artists do this on purpose? And I would like to give them the benefit of the doubt and say no.
The artist...
Yes, the artists did this on purpose. They made it.
They drew everything 100% the way it was supposed to be drawn. Okay.
Oh, oops! We actually made Goblin Slayer.
We were
Oops.
we were supposed to have a really charming goblin, and he was flirting, and he had a giant penis, and
I
all these
mean,
other like all this other stupid crap. It's like,
and
yeah,
my
yeah,
pencil
no.
slipped. My pencil slipped, and this is what we got.
We were supposed
Oops.
to have this whole romantic scene, but nope, it's gonna be rape and killing. So
Yeah, we're supposed to have a romantic scene between the fighter and the goblin, but my pencil slipped, and now it's rape. So, you know,
well, what
my
happened to all
bad.
those thousands of frames of animation we just drew? Oh, I don't know how we just forgot about it.
Yeah, what can I say? My pencil really slipped. I mean, this is,
But that doesn't mean that it was all a coincidence either. The issue that I assume to be at play here is that the default mode in which a naked woman is artistically portrayed is sexy. So if you draw, or in this case animate a naked woman and do that uncritically, that predisposition to make her sexy seeps in.
okay, the Sword Maiden is another fan service character, but and she does get her backstory is where she gets raped by goblins, but it's only shown for a short time. And every other time that she's sexualized in any way, it's always like in a good light. Like she comes in and asks for Goblin Slayer's help, and that's when she's kind of sexualized. But she's not raped and then sexualized or anything like that.
Yeah, and plus he's talking about the intention of an artist to make something attractive and
Yeah,
accidentally, making a scene which is supposed to be bad attractive. It's like, well, not necessarily sexualized. I would argue attractive can be anything. You can be attracted to literally anything. But that doesn't mean that unless you provide examples of sexualization or sexuality, and then you associate it. Again, I gave the example of vampires being violent and sexual because of their nature and whatever superpowers or magical powers they have. Then we can wrap our brains around, oh, okay, this is why they're seductive. This is why they touch you and you feel pleasure. And if they bite you, you feel even more pleasure, etc. There could be explanations for that. That doesn't happen in this, okay? It just does not happen.
it doesn't happen in Goblin Slayer. It doesn't.
If this is what happened, the animators should have been more aware of what they were doing and
Oh,
more.
so he doesn't even know. He's like, if this is what happened, it's like,
If this would happen, how are they going to be more aware of things that aren't possibly there? Can you be aware of things you aren't aware of? Like,
we need to be more rapey with our rape scene, guys. We have to really get more violent.
and more gruesome,
Yeah.
and we have to show more
So
nudity
the
or something?
morons on the other end of the screen could be
Can
like,
really get it.
they could really this is rape, guys.
We got to make it so horrific that even the weirdos find it unappealing.
I give this rape a 3.5 out of 10. There's not enough thrusting. It's like, what the hell?
Yeah. That's
more
crazy.
careful to avoid what we ended up with. And I think that speaks more to a lack of prudence than anything else.
Okay, bring up the virtues of prudence. Like, yeah, sure, whatever.
Prudent. Okay.
They're not good enough. They're not good enough artists. Okay.
The rape scenes in episode 1 of Goblin Slayer dominated the discussion surrounding the series well into its run. The show's detractors used them validly to justify why they were quick to stop watching it. Proponents of the show then responded to this by arguing why they found these scenes to be appropriate. The Goblin Slayer discourse then got caught in this vicious cycle, and I think that's a shame because there is something much more concerning about Goblin Slayer that needs to be discussed.
Yeah, a bunch of people who are crazy and a bunch of people saying, no, this didn't happen. Look
Yeah.
at the goddamn show, please.
A bunch of people who know how writing works and can respect how things happen and how villains are made, and generally how writing kind of works, versus a bunch of really crazy sensitive people, like really insane people.
Yeah. There are way more sexualized, titillated, violent, sexy animes out there, or have
Oh,
been
yeah.
depicted. This does not
Yeah.
even. Maybe a 1 out of 10 for how visceral it was. Violence, I'd give it a 7, maybe an 8. But for sex, not. It doesn't even.
It doesn't even register really. I mean, it's happening, but it's not attractive or appealing or sexy or sexualized.
Yeah, they do have attractive female characters in the show that are naked.
That's about it. That's about it.
I'll give it that, but it's not for the sake of it. It's just they're in a bath. Women get naked in a bath. We get it. Okay.
Something kind of insidious about the series that is so all-encompassing that it cannot possibly have been accidental. And that is that the world of Goblin Slayer, in its entirety, is constructed to reinforce a fascist worldview.
Okay, I think we could stop here.
Yeah, this
I think
just
this-
went, whoa, out in left field.
I think this is a good stopping point.
Someone's bringing in the clown car. Doot, 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 doot.
So yeah, here's my 20-minute dissertation on why this rape is sexualized. Also, fascism.
Yeah, I heard you saying this after 20 minutes, and I just stopped and went, are you, like, we're not going to go through an hour and 20 minutes of talking about fascism. I was like, yeah. It's like, no, we're not.
It sure seems that way. I think so. I think it's a good place. I think we can quit here.
You know, my economic theory about communism is really a depiction of sexual fantasies. Really?
Oh my god. Okay. Yeah, we can stop here.
Yeah, I don't think there's any point. I think this gentleman is going through university, and he has like a general arts and sciences course. Maybe
He's got like I mean, he's probably like an I don't know, arts, like a
Could
liberal
be.
arts or something. And
it could be, yeah.
I don't know.
And he's listening to a lot of weird professors, and giving him ideas, and he's just bored, and he's watching anime. And he's just, wait a
Goblin Slayer.
second.
Goblin Slayer is fascism.
Yeah.
Come on. I mean, come on.
This is not even worth talking about. This is just look at this. The disturbing ideology of Goblin Slayer is apparently a political ideology.
It's fascism somehow.
Next
It's secretly
time,
fascism.
Next time I play Baldur's Gate and I fight some kobolds, or
Take that, you communists.
I'm gonna be thinking, should I start allowing
Am I fascist now?
the purchase of land to my subjects? Should they own the means of production? Shall I tax them or not?
Goblin Slayer does.
It's gonna.
Yeah, did I tell you there's a whole chapter where Goblin Slayer goes around and says, I'm going to have change the means of production to the state.
Gonna start learning Italian. It's like, boy. Well, that was under 2 hours, I think. Pretty good. We're getting better at this. We don't make the videos. We just watch them with you guys, and we follow them along, and hopefully you guys had a good time. Great time so far. This is enough to keep me sane. But thanks for spending the time with us. If there's any other videos, I mean, randomly, this was LiteratureDevil's idea, but if you guys have any, always submit them on the comments, community tab, Twitter, Facebook, wherever you like. Discord's great too. That's where I read most of my comments as quickly as possible. So thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you guys soon. Have yourself a great evening, and take it easy.